Joe Azzalina, and we welcome back once again Mike Azzalina. Thank you again, Mike, for coming on the show.
Yes, sir.
We, Joe, we're diving right into MLB, correct?
This is my favorite night of the year. Probably, maybe Christmas might have a close second, but this is seriously one of my favorite times. I'm so excited for spring training. And yeah, we're going to do the preview of the NL East and give a lot of different details tonight. And when you listen to this, it'll probably be daytime, but whatever. But yeah, that's what we're going to plan to do. The Atlanta Braves, the Miami Marlins, the New York Mets, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Washington Nationals, and not in all that same order. I just threw them all out there. So Derek, back to you to get us started with probably the most powerful team in the National League East.
And just before we get started, just so everyone knows, don't forget we are on YouTube. Don't be afraid to go find our video on YouTube, all podcast platforms, and then, of course, our Facebook and Twitter pages. If you have a Twitter, go out and check us out on Twitter as well. So as Joe mentioned, we will start our NL East preview. We do realize this is a little early, maybe spring training starting tomorrow. So things may happen up until then. So just keep that in mind. This is in mid-February when we're doing this. So we'll start with the Atlanta Braves, who I will say, according to, it just came out today, Fangraphs, which is a very good site. I would recommend people check it out if you're a baseball fan. Lots of great information on there. Fangraphs says that the Atlanta Braves have a 67.8% chance to make the playoffs this year. Last year, the Braves, of course, finished first in the division at 35-25 and lost 4-3 to the Los Angeles Dodgers in the NLCS. Coach Brian Snitker comes back for his fifth season, and he is 318 and 292 in Atlanta. Mike, let's start with you. Overall thoughts on Atlanta Braves going into the 2021 season?
Yeah, guys, first off, I want to say thank you for letting me come back on. And obviously, the baseball is a passion that Joseph and I both share. So I'm excited to talk through, this division, what I feel is the best division in baseball. I don't think, there's much of a question. I think the NL West is probably right there neck and neck if there is another division that competes. But top to bottom, this division is just absolutely loaded. It feels like the teams just keep one-upping each other all off season, with the exception of the Marlins, who we'll talk about later. But it all starts at the top with the Atlanta Braves. They're the best team in the division, and they won the division the last 2 years. And to be quite honest with you, until somebody dethrones them, said this about the Phillies during their run from 08 to 11, 07 to 11, until someone dethrones them, they are that team. They are the team to take away. When you have who I consider to be the most underrated MVP in baseball history in Freddie Freeman, sitting in the middle of your order last year of his contract. So he's playing for that contract that he so deserves anyway. But truly one of the most underrated players, underappreciated players, what he does with the bat and the glove. Got 6 potential 20 home run guys sitting in that lineup. Acuna is a 30-30 guy, probably a 40-30 guy. Freeman, who I mentioned, Ozuna, who they just re-signed. Ozzy Albies is a guy who could get to 20. Austin Riley's a 30 home run guy potentially. And a guy that gets forgotten and someone that I often discredited over the course of his career, who stepped up big time last year, is Dansby Swanson. Has become a really sound player in that lineup. There's no out in that lineup that you can look at and say, okay, here it comes. You're going to get, it doesn't exist. Are there weaknesses? Sure. Are there things they needed to improve on in the offseason? Absolutely. I'm sure we'll touch on those. But just the general scope of this team, top to bottom, they are absolutely threatening offensively. There's just no hole. And that's terrifying. That's terrifying for an opposing pitching staff. And Joseph, I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah. I mean, you covered, I think, up and down their lineup. They don't really have that weak point. You have Kristen Pache, who's going to be an interesting newcomer. He saw a little time last year, but he's gonna probably hit a little bit, but he's also a better defender. the only thing I have to say is the only guy you forgot was Travis Darno, who hit 320 last year and had 34 RBIs. He was a big part of that Atlanta Braves team. He's back. And listen, I went to see him play last year against the Phillies, and I came away, or 2 years ago, I came away with crying as Acuna just killed a ball to deep left center field. Like the bottom line is Atlanta has all kinds of talent. I want to direct our attention real quick though to the starting rotation, and they didn't have their ace Mike Soroka last year. If he stays healthy, and I think Derek said this off air earlier to me, he's slated to start opening day right now. If not, they still have Max Fried, who looked darn good. So Soroka, Fried, Ian Anderson looks to be the real deal. Charlie Morton will slot in perfectly. And Drew Smiley, who we know in Philly for 1 year. The only weakness I see is a bullpen that maybe isn't so good, but they still got arms out there. So, Derek, what do you think about Atlanta?
Well, so let me just touch on a couple prospects for Atlanta that we may be seeing this year. Well, two that we'll definitely see, and one Joe and I talked about we might. So we talked about Christian Pache. So now all these overall rankings are going to be based on MLB.com. So it's their top 100 minor leaguers on MLB.com. So Christian Pache is number 12. He's an outfielder. He's definitely going to be probably in the starting lineup this year. He's really known for his speed and defense. He was voted the best defensive prospect 2 years in a row. He's a Gold Glove caliber center fielder. So you should see him improve his base stealing, but not the greatest hitter. But Pache, you'll probably see him starting in center field. And then Ian Anderson is another one who really came to pitch in the playoffs, that's for sure, and helped the Braves with that dwindling rotation really make it into the NLCS. 3-pitch mix for Ian Anderson, fastball to 96. He misses a lot of bats. 10.7 per 9 Ks per 9 innings in 2019. Big power curveball, which is a plus pitch when he can command it, but needs to work on his changeup to be really a top level starter, they say. But very good, 1.95 in 2020 in 6 starts. Drew Waters is another name to look out for, outfielder, maybe on the team, make it to the team this year. Mike, I'll knock it back to you. So some additions for the Braves this year. They brought in Charlie Morton on a 1-year deal. They brought back Marcell Ozuna for 4 years, $65 million. Drew Smiley 1 year, Tomlin 1 year, and then a couple interesting minor league deals with Nate Jones, Jason Kipnis, Pablo Sandoval, guys who have been around. Any of those additions that really stand out to you as if they didn't get that person that may have hurt them, but now that they have them, it's really going to keep them moving forward?
Yeah, I've said this all off season to Joseph as we talk about baseball pretty much daily. I think one of the things that this year, although last year was the most different baseball season we've ever experienced, this year is going to be different in the sense that every team needs more depth. You're looking at pitching staffs and made up of arms that threw 100 innings tops last year. I don't even think that was reached in a 60-game season. If it was barely eclipsed. And you're going to be asking these guys to come out and throw 200 innings. Charlie Morton's 37 years old. That's not an easy task after a shortened season last year. And he went into the playoffs and had to pitch in the playoffs. So you're really asking a lot of a 37-year-old guy. Interesting fact about the Braves rotation. They were not a strong rotation in terms of league average last year. 28th in ERA, 27th in walks and hits per innings pitched, 28th in walks per 9, 28th in strikeouts per 9. Does Charlie Morton really make you that much better? Maybe. I don't think they jump because of Charlie Morton. The jump is what Joseph talked about. Mike Soroka. Is he going to be the same guy he was before in the torn Achilles? That's an injury that can change the complexion of somebody's career. Do I hope that? Absolutely not. The kid's as talented as they come. I hope he's healthy. I'm looking forward to many times that he's taking the mound against the Phillies. I think he's incredibly talented. To kind of go back to your question though, Derek, one that stands out and someone I know people were very excited about when they brought him back was Marcell Ozuna. But I think the Braves had a different plan when they brought him back. I think their plan was, we're going to DH him. Well, now he's got to play left field, and I'm going to tell you right up front, he's an awful outfielder. He's horrific. He is one of the worst major league outfielders that is out there in terms of defense. And for a defense that ranked 28th in advanced metrics last year, that's a problem. And I know you have to score runs to win, but you also have to prevent them. And I don't know if the Braves got better in the two areas that they struggled most in last year. They're still the best team. But when it comes to playoff time, I mean, if you take a look at defense over the course of the last 5-6 playoff runs, you're looking at teams that won the World Series. The Royals were first in defense. The Cubs were first in advanced defense. The Rays last year were first. These teams are top 10 defenses outside of the Dodgers, who are just loaded everywhere else. But if you're going to win in the playoffs, you have to be able to keep runs from crossing the plate in addition to scoring them. They're the best team in this division, but I'm not ready to say that any of these additions made them better than the Dodgers or even the Padres for that matter.
Is Christian Pache going to play 2/3 of the outfield? Is what you might end up thinking.
Like the ocean of the earth, with Acuna playing right and Ozuna playing left, it could be a natural disaster out there in the outfield.
Now, Joe, we'll start with you. Real quick, some strengths and some weaknesses for the Braves that you think. Do you have any off the top of your head?
Their strength is their power. I think it's pretty easy to see that if you watch baseball. Ronald Acuna, as Michael pointed out, is one of the best hitters probably right now in the game. The guy turns around a fastball better than anybody. I mean, he's just a great hitter. Freddie Freeman is one of the, like he said again, most underrated player and a great bat to have. He hits a lot of doubles. He goes line to line. He's just such a good hitter. I do want to say though, a weakness might be lack of the Braves always have guys off the bench that do well, and these names don't really jump off the page at me. Alex Jackson, now Camargo's been there, he's okay. Jack Mayfield, Abraham Almonte, don't know much about him. He's 091 last year. If Wooders makes the team, he'll be that fourth outfielder to start. But I will say though, I have to say this: Inciarte slated, as my magazine says, to be in left field this year. So now I know that was without Ozuna, but you wonder if Inciarte has some games out there too, though, when Ozuna just can't go, right? And it helps you against a better pitching team in a pitcher's duel, like a Jacob deGrom, for instance. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Pache sounds like he's going to play center, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't play some left with Inciarte playing center. Acuna is your right fielder. Acuna is set in right field, I think. But other than that, Atlanta takes the division comfortably. In my low voice, they take the division comfortably.
Mike, real quick, any strengths and weaknesses for the Braves that you think could make a difference in the division?
I think anytime you have the MVP on your roster sitting in the middle of your lineup, that's a big plus. I do think in terms of depth, they probably have the best youth to promote, not retreads or anything like that, but actual youth to put out on the field every day. You guys mentioned Drew Waters, one of my favorite prospects in baseball. He's a former second-round pick. He's only 22 years old. If one of those guys gets hurt out there, he just kind of slides right in. They have it in their rotation. Kyle Miller's a pretty solid starting depth pitcher piece. Bryce Wilson's a guy no one has mentioned so far, and he's a dude who could come up and give them dominant innings. They have another kid, Josiel De La Cruz, who could come up and give them dominant innings in the rotation. So in terms of their depth, if guys like Smiley aren't cutting it, Morton being 37 years old, if he needs extra innings, sideline for a week or two, they have the arms to come up and do. I think that's a major strength for them. We haven't mentioned their pen, and I feel like that could end up being a weakness. I don't know that they got much better there. The rotation was a difficult piece for them last year, but that's because of the injuries to Soroka. They were trying to supplant guys. But the bullpen, aside of Chris Martin, Will Smith, and AJ Minter, I mean, Tyler Matzik gave him some positives, but there's not a whole lot in terms of name value there and guys that really pitch to a low ERA or even a low WHIP. So not necessarily a weakness, but not a strength either. They're going to hit enough, I think, to kind of negate it. But we'll see. I even me reaching for a weakness there doesn't hurt them in the long run. They're still the best team in the division, in a really good division.
Yeah, you guys kind of said it. I would say that the strengths are definitely the middle of the lineup, and I wrote down pitching depth is a strength, not necessarily the pitchers. And you kind of mentioned Smiley. What are you going to get out of a Wilson, like you mentioned, or a Kyle Wright, or even Charlie Morton, an older Charlie Morton? And then weaknesses I did put in about the bullpen. They lost Melanson. Melanson was there,
That's
right?
a big
And
one.
Darren
Melanson,
O'Day,
yep.
where they lost both of those guys, which could end up being key. They didn't really bring any in. So we'll get Mike's opinion on where the Braves finish at the end of the show. But for now, we will move on to the Miami Marlins, who Fangraphs has a 0.7 chance of making the playoffs last year, which is very interesting considering last year they finished second. A huge surprise to everybody. But they lost 3-0 to the Atlanta Braves in the NLDS. Coach Don Mattingly is coming back for his sixth season. He is 307 and 399 in Miami. Joe, let's start off with you. Overall impressions of the Miami Marlins going into 2021.
Well, a couple names in the lineup stand out to me. Brian Anderson's a really good player. I mean, he knocked in 38 last year. He had a big couple years, and I've seen a lot of him now, and I am a fan of his. If he wasn't in the East, I'd cheer for him more. I think a guy like Corey Dickerson is going to be important for them. He's got to start things off. We loved him in Philly when he was there. He's that bat. I wanted to compliment McCutchen. I would be that guy. But he's a spark plug. He's that table setter. The other name I want to bring people's attention to, and a guy that really has to step up, I think, for them this year is Lewis Brinson, because a lot of people forget this guy was a pretty high draft pick, if I'm not mistaken. He's coming from, I think it was the Texas Rangers in that one trade. Now it seems like a long time ago, but he's a guy that needs to step up. And if he doesn't, he might be finding himself riding the pine, as they say. And one name I will say, and I know Mike will elaborate because he's followed his career a little closer than me, but that's former Philly player, pitcher Sixto Sanchez, because this guy's going to make me drink a lot during this year because this guy is electric.
Water.
And when you're getting already in the same breath, yeah, water, right?
It's a family
and,
show.
and Gatorade. No, but like you're right. No. When you're being mentioned in the same breath as Pedro Martinez at this young of your career, come on, guys. Like this is a no-brainer. Like the guy's a stud, and he's not a Philly anymore. So that's my thoughts on the Marlins. And I did jot a question or two down. So if you need me to ask a question or later, let me know.
Mike, you want to overall thoughts on the Marlins?
Yeah, I think if anybody benefited from a short season in all of baseball last year, it's the Miami Marlins. They, I think, really took advantage of a situation where a team that finished in the bottom half of baseball in offense, middle of the pack in starting pitching, and bottom 10 in bullpen, in a division that was kind of weakened in different areas last year in terms of injuries with the Mets struggling pen in Philadelphia. The Nationals were beat up beyond belief. And they just kind of snuck in as that second team in the division. I don't think that they were great in any way, shape, or form. They were 13th in baseball and defense, so they weren't even great there. Interestingly enough, when you look at this roster and you think of the Marlins, you think youth, right? When you look at this roster, they only have two guys in their top 8, in their starting 8, under the age of 30. It's Brian Anderson, who Joseph mentioned, who is one of my favorite players in the league no one knows about. And the other one, Jorge Alfaro, former Philly farmhand, who went over in the Real Muto deal. Aside from that, every dude in that starting lineup is 30-year-old or older, which is crazy to think about when you think about the Marlins. Joseph mentioned Lewis Brinson, who's going to be their fourth outfielder because they just signed Adam Duvall. But Brinson, Joseph, I'm just going to correct, came over as the main piece in the deal for I'm drawing a blank on the kid from Milwaukee, the best
Oh,
player.
Yelich. It was the Yelich
Thank
deal.
you. Yeah, and Christian
That's what
Yelich.
it
He
was.
came over in that deal
That's
for
right.
Christian Yelich. So, he has not lived up to that billing. You mentioned the young starters with Sixto being Joseph, you're right, he's an absolute stud. Sandy Alcantara is another one. They've got Hernandez, Lopez, Rogers, all these kids 25 years and under. While that's a major strength for them this year, I mentioned earlier, that's going to present problems. Whenever you have a young pitcher, you have them on an innings limit. But now you're dealing with young pitchers after a shortened season, and you've got to balance that with an innings limit on top of it. So I think if anybody falls far from grace this year, I don't think anybody falls further than the Miami Marlins do.
I think that's a great point to finish at, Mark. I wonder if all that veteran depth they got in the lineup, some of it maybe should have went to the pitching staff.
Yeah.
Because if anything happens to any of those guys you mentioned, they're all 25 and younger pretty much. There's not really any depth in the minor leagues that I'm looking at. They're all the same age. They're all 25 or younger. So I think that could be where they struggle a little bit this year. Great arms, but I think they do struggle a little bit there. Not really any additions and subtractions for the Marlins this year. They did sign Anthony Bass to a 2-year deal, who's a middle of the road reliever. Same thing for Ross Detweiler, a 1-year deal. Adam Duvall, they actually just signed to a 1-year deal. Another interesting one is Dylan Floro, who they traded for from the LA Dodgers. But they lost Brandon Kinsler, they lost Brad Boxberger, they lost Stanek is gone. They seem to have lost a lot, and it's almost like this lineup and everything is placeholders. It's kind of like they realize last year might have been a little bit of a fluke, so let's bring in some guys who are just going to kind of take up the space until, let me throw out some names here. We talked about Sixto Sanchez. I don't need to talk about him. Great high 90s fastball with some sink. He's a great pitcher. Another guy to look out for, JJ Bleday, an outfielder, very disciplined hitter, hits to all fields. Not a great runner, but for now he's a corner outfielder. Expected to start in Double-A, but he could quickly rise up. Max Meyer is another young pitcher to look for, though. Mid 90s fastball, might end up being a reliever. And then a Jazz Chisholm is a up the middle shortstop, second baseman who even got some innings last year. Look for him to maybe get in the rotation a little bit this year, if not right out of spring training. But 21 games with the Marlins last year, explosive bat speed, lefty swing. He does strike out a lot, can get pull happy, but they say he's a 2020 potential. So Mike, we'll go back to you. Strengths and weaknesses for the Marlins going into 2021 here.
Yeah, I love Jazz Chisholm. I was waiting for you to mention him. But they love Miguel Rojas. I mean, they absolutely love him as a leader on this team. So it's gonna. I think if he comes up, they might try him at second base to replace Birdie. But either way, he's going to be a player. We're going to hear a lot about him. Until they decide to trade him because they don't want to pay him at the end of the day, which is what happens with every single Marlin. But the strength in this team is actually a weakness at the same time. I mentioned the rotation being a strength. The fact that they're so young coming off the type of season that we just had last year could prove to be a weakness for them in the long run. They're going to be fun to watch. I think Alcantara is going to take a step back. He was really good last year, but I think he benefited from a short season quite a bit. He does have some injury history, not a terrible amount, nothing major, but he misses starts here and there. I also think that this front office sort of rested on their laurels a little bit. Like you mentioned, they're pretty status quo, not a whole lot of changes or additions.
No.
It worked. It worked for them last year, but they only had to play 2 months. And baseball is not a 2-month sprint 99.99% of the times we get to watch it. It is an absolute marathon, and it's going to go back to that this year. And this lineup won't withstand a marathon. It just won't.
Joe, strengths and weaknesses for the Marlins?
Well, I did start out by saying that I thought one of their strengths was somewhat of their lineup. Listening to Mike talk, though, it does seem to me that it could be more of a weakness. It, as much as you're going to get good production from certain guys, what are you going to get from an aging Sterling Marte? Well, he's a big key to this lineup. Now, Miguel Rojas hit 304, so that's what's making me confused, because you have guys that will hit in this lineup, but will they hit consistently? And I think consistency might end up being their downfall. So, and that's exactly what Mike just was saying. I say if I'm going to give it another strength, I might say that if they somehow can make a move for a starter, maybe they surprise people and sign a Jake Odorizzi. Like, I mean, that might be a move that wouldn't be a bad move for Miami right now. And also, I did have a question, though, real quick, that I just wanted to know. We're talking about Sixto Sanchez in the future. I really was thinking about this the other night. What does he need to do this year, maybe to make people believe that his future is bright? Like, what does he need to do this year in 2021 and 22 to sit there and be like, okay, he's arrived?
Well, first, your points of Miguel Rojas about him hitting 302. That's because he hit 700 against the Phillies last year, and he got to play them all the time. So the fact that he's hitting 302 is only because he played the Phillies enough to bring that average up. I'd love to see his splits against the other teams he played.
Phillies killer.
About Sanchez, I gotta be honest, man. I don't know if he has to do a whole lot to show people he's arrived. I think the question is, what could happen to make people question him right now, right? Like,
well, yeah, so negative.
Yeah, the thing about it is that people are so high on Sixto, but I think it comes down to, can he start 25 games this year? Is he able to start 25 games, go deep into those games, be dominant in those games, or are we going to have to cap him a little bit? For a starter to be truly Pedro Martinez-esque, and I know it's early in his career and they want to take it easy with him, you got to be able to go out there day in, day out, dominate games, and not miss starts. And Pedro will be the first to tell you he sees himself in Sixto. So I don't think it's a question of whether or not this kid's talented. I think it's whether or not this kid's talent projects over 162 game season, and can he be there for his team throughout that stretch. I know that was always a concern during his minor league career in Philadelphia. The front office tried to sway the fan base based on that point when they traded him. They said he had shoulder issues, this, that, the other thing. That stuff was leaked. But if he can come out and show that that's not truly factual, that he can sustain a long season, I think people would say, yeah, he's the real deal. But we're gonna have to. I don't know if we'll get to see that this year or not, man. I really don't know if they're gonna give him the chance to do it.
And I guess they could kind of benefit that they have so many guys that are kind of in the same spot. You mentioned Alcantara, Lopez, they're all young guys who are out to prove themselves and want to stay at the level that they were at. So, but I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. I think they are going to be a very fun team to watch. They were, I believe, second in the league in stolen bases last year. Young upstart pitching staff, and they have a ton of depth coming. There were even names I didn't even mention that could potentially come up. A very strong farm system, and of course, weaknesses could also be all those things. Is all the young guys, but I did write down how everyone else in the division got better and the Marlins kind of stayed the same. So, and that may be why they are a 0.7% chance of making the playoffs according to Fangraphs. But that'll do it for the Miami Marlins. So now we will move on to the New York Mets, who have been a big name in the offseason, that's for sure. According to Fangraphs, the Mets have an 81.2% chance to make the playoffs this year. Last year, they finished, well, I mean, it wrote fifth, but technically it was tied for fourth with the Nationals at 26-34. Coach Luis Rojas is returning for his second season, obviously 26-34 last year. Let's start with you, Mike, since I know you love the Mets. Let's talk about overall, what do we think about the Mets offseason going into 2021?
You know, all I heard about all season was how much money this guy was going to come in and spend. It's all I heard about. Steve Cohen, he's the richest owner in baseball. He's going to spend. They missed on every possible highly priced free agent that was out there. Like they didn't get one high priced top shelf free agent. What they did do was they went and they signed the second best catcher on the market in McCann. James McCann is a very solid offensive catcher. Doesn't bring you much defensively. I don't think he's improved him all that much defensively. Maybe a bit, but nothing to write home about. And then, you know, one of my favorite players in baseball, probably a top 5 player when push comes to shove, in Francisco Lindor. Really what it does is it improves an already top shelf offense. We're talking a top 5 offense in baseball before this. So I don't know that they necessarily did anything to improve. Now, people will argue me, yes, they brought back Stroman and they brought in Carlos Carrasco. And I would argue right back that Carlos Carrasco pitched in one of the weakest divisions in baseball for the last 6-7 years. And he was on the best team in that division, mind you. And alongside of that, Stroman is one of those guys that I've been harping on, and I'll continue to harp on throughout this whole podcast. The guy didn't even pitch last year, and they're asking for him to pitch 200 innings this year. You know, they go 6 guys deep in that rotation. They don't have much in terms of depth. Robert Gesellman is number 6. And I don't see how that rotation has improved. I mean, Jacob deGrom is what he is, which is arguably the best pitcher in baseball. But after you cross him, I'm not all that threatened by their rotation. They are going to hit, and their bullpen looks incredible on paper. As long as they stay healthy, they look incredible on paper. I'm not ready to say they're going to dethrone the Braves, and I'm not ready to sit here and say they're better than the Phillies at the end of the day. That's kind of where I stand on them. Are they better? Yeah, Francisco Lindor makes any team better, but they're in that same conversation of having to play guys in the field who aren't meant to play the field. JD Davis, not a very good defensive third baseman. You know, they're leaning on a young left fielder in Dominic Smith, who, my goodness, that dude out there looks lost. So again, they're going to hit the cover off the ball, but I'm not sold that defensively or even rotational wise, they're that much better than the other teams in the division.
Joe?
Well, this is tough. Listen, we know what we're getting from Lindor. He's going to be exciting. I kind of liken him to a better Jose Reyes. He's just going to be he's a good hitter. He's a very good hitter. He's going to get you a lot of doubles. He's going to hit some home runs. He's going to play great defense. I wonder if the Mets aren't going to be as good as some of the guys that have already been there. What are you going to get from Jeff McNeil? There's a player nobody talks about. He's a really good hitter. He drives Phillies pitchers nuts. I'm telling you right now. I've seen him foul off 18 balls in one at bat. How does Brandon Nimmo line up, or any one of the other outfielders he just acquired, and Kevin Pillar or Almora? Some of that's depth, I get it, but you're gonna have to put a guy out there in center field, as we'll touch on the Phillies later, and you know what exactly will look like there. But me and Michael have gone back and forth about this, and as far as the rotation goes, all right, yeah, DeGrom's the man. There's no doubting how good he is. I guess Carrasco and Stroman are huge, and a returning Syndergaard. If they give innings and really baffle hitters and do all that stuff you need to do to be successful, the Mets are going to be really good. But I don't believe that they're going to be a 90-win team, as some people think. That's a little ridiculous. So the bullpen, I think, is pretty legit. We know Diaz, though, hiccup after hiccup. He's not always shut down either. Derek, do you think the Mets are as good as I don't know not just the Braves, but are they the Padres? I mean, how good are the Mets, Derek? Your dad, Charlie, shout out. He's a big Mets fan.
And I'm sure he would say the same thing. Let's not forget, it's the Mets.
There it is.
It's still the Mets.
There it is.
And they find ways to lose games. Now I did know, so their lineup is basically 26-30. They're cashing in on that lineup for probably the next 5 years, with maybe a few additions here and there, but that's pretty much it. And there's not really a problem with that. They have a ton. They're going to hit a lot of home runs. They're going to hit up for a great average. They were number 1 in average last year, number 2 in on base percentage, all numbers I'm sure Mike was alluding to. But again, the ERA is where in the starting rotation is what hurt them. Joe mentioned Syndergaard. He's maybe looking to come back, I think June, July. He had March Tommy John surgery. So can you really count on Syndergaard? I think they have to go out and get somebody else. I don't know who it is. I know they were in the mix for Paxton, who went to my Mariners. Taiwan Walker may be an option. We mentioned Odorizzi, somebody. They need something else, especially another huge injury that they've had already. Seth Lugo, who has been Mr. Everything for the Mets. When they needed him to start, he was the starter. When they needed him to be the long reliever, he was the long reliever. When he needed to be the closer, he was the closer. He's out at least through April, supposedly. And then, of course, there's one Robinson Cano who was suspended for all of 2021. Not currently, Joe. Not currently to me. I don't know what you're getting out of the bullpen. It does look great on paper, but Betances, what are you getting out of him? Let me just take a look at these stats from last year. Betances had a 7.71 in 11 innings. Someone like who they brought in, Mike Montgomery, had a 5 ERA last year. Jacob Barnes had a 5.5. You're putting a lot on Edwin Diaz, I think, and that's not good because
No, he's not
Edwin
good.
Diaz, he was great for Seattle, but he bombed when he went there in 2019. And then, I mean, I think he was a 1.75 last year. I think he's going to go higher than that.
Do they need, because I have to ask this since we're talking about the bullpen, do you think they benefit from possibly giving a 1-year deal to Trevor Rosenthal?
I'm sure they're involved. I know they wanted to bring back Justin Wilson, maybe a lefty, which would have been nice.
Other side.
I think they need, as a lefty, but I think they
went to the
need
Yankees.
one more starter. I think they need one more bullpen guy.
Yeah.
I mean, at least until Lugo comes back, but that's putting a lot on two guys, Syndergaard and Lugo, who were both injured last year. Really quick, I mean, we mentioned a lot of the additions for the Mets: Lindor, Carrasco, James McCann. Trevor May is probably going to be the 8th inning guy for them.
Former Philly.
Interesting center field options. They didn't go off after, they didn't get George Springer. I'm going to say they went after him. They just didn't get him. And Jackie Bradley Jr., they probably said no to. So they went with Albert Amora Jr. and Kevin Pillar, who they actually just signed in the past day. Jonathan VR is going to probably be the utility guy. Subtractions: Steven Matz, Ahmed Rosario, Andres Jimenez, Wilson Ramos. Let's not forget UNS Cespedes was on the team. Porcello, Waka. That's a lot gone, and I don't think that they had as great of an off season as what they're saying. I agree with Mike, and I think they still have more to go. I'm just gonna kind of round out and then kick to you guys. I realize we're talking, but I have the strengths. Of course, the top of the top of the rotation is very good. And I wrote down the lineup versus right-handed pitching because against lefties, you're going to see a lot of those bench guys come in, Pilar and Almora Jr. and maybe Villar and for a Dominic Smith or a McNeil and that or a Nimmo. I don't like that too much. Um, Defensive outfield is horrible. Didn't get any better there. And then of course rotation depth. They don't have any depth. Um,
Yes,
Number 5 was Lucchesi, Drew Peterson. There's not a Gesellman, Jordan Yamamoto. I mentioned to Joe Jared Eichhoff was signed on a minor league deal, so maybe he makes maybe he shows up for the Mets. But strengths, weaknesses, Joe, for the Mets, real quick.
I look at if this lineup is the way they're saying, if it's going to be Lindor 3, Conforto 4, and Alonso 5, that's a pretty good middle of the order. We did say they're going to get their hits and home runs. Now, I can see Frankie hitting 1 or 2 too, so we're going to see how that plays out, right? We could do lineups all night. It would take us till midnight. We could do lineups all night. That's a strength of the middle of the order. No, and Dominic Smith, I'll even include him. The weakness, I'm going to say probably listen, I'm not going to sleep on the rotation. Even after the grind, I'm going to still say the rotation's pretty good. I will say the bullpen will implode. And we're going to see the same thing that happened in Philly last year to New York. The bullpen implodes. Good job, Steve Cohen. Anyway, all right. That's my strengths and weaknesses. That's my take. I can't wait for this next team, by the way.
I mean, I don't know if it's going to be Philly bad in terms of that.
Probably.
I just think on name alone, they're going to get by. I mean, I know Diaz has had his struggles. I know Betances struggled last year, but don't forget about Familia out there. He's improved immensely over time. Tommy Hunter was one of the Phillies' best relievers for a stretch last year. He's a Met now. And the first day of the offseason, I said to Joseph, I want Trevor May in a Phillies uniform. He's a really solid reliever. And I do think that the bullpen can end up being a strength for them. To me, Joseph, you can wake me up on the rotation because I'm just not sold. After DeGrom, there's nothing that I'm impressed by. And I like Carlos Carrasco. I think he's a fine middle to bottom of the rotation starter at this point in his career. He's 33 years old. It's not the same Carrasco. So I'll be curious to see what he brings as a number 2 because I don't see him in that light. And in terms of the offense, they're going to rake. But guys, I might be alone in this. I feel like every conversation I get in about the Mets, I'm alone in this. I am not a truther of Pete Alonso. I just don't think he is what everybody that first year presented him to be. I don't think he's a 50 home run guy. I don't even think he's a 40 home run guy. He was absolutely opened up last year in terms of tape and what teams saw in him. He looked completely lost.
The jury's out. The jury's out on him.
I'm not sold. I think there's a ton of power there, but I think pitchers might have found a way around it. This will be a very telling year for Pete Alonso.
Key guy.
Well, we will. I think we can say we don't think Mike is going to pick them to win the division, but we'll see where he puts them in the division at the end of the show. We'll move on now to the Washington Nationals. Fangraphs has the Washington Nationals at a 24.6% chance to make the playoffs. They finished tied for 4th with the Mets at 26-34. Coach Dave Martinez is in his 4th season. He's gone 201 and 183. Not a lot in terms of, I've mentioned to Joe, the worst farm system in Major League Baseball is the Washington Nationals. So they probably should be trying to win now. Mike, do we think they made quite a few additions? I'm sure you'll touch on some of them this year. Did they do enough to call themselves one of the favorites in the division, or do they need to have a lot of luck on their hands?
I mean, when you sport an average age in your rotation of 32 years old and you're brought down by a 27-year-old, you're going to need a lot of luck. There's a lot of innings in that Max Scherzer right arm. There's a lot of innings in that John Lester left arm. There's a ton of innings in a very injury-prone Steven Strasburg. Patrick Corbin might truly end up being the best pitcher in this rotation this year, at least the most consistent to an extent, because they're banking on some dudes who have a ton of mileage to get 200 plus innings, and I just don't see any. You said it, Derek. There's no depth in terms of youth sitting behind these guys. There's not a whole lot there. I will say this for them: whenever you have a Trey Turner and a Juan Soto sitting at the top and middle of your order, you got something offensively. When those two are going, they're near impossible outs. There was a game this past season where the two of them went 10 for 10 against the Phillies combined. And it felt like there was just no way to get them out. No matter where the pitch was, it ended up finding grass or finding the bleachers. That being said, they have not found a way to replace the hole in the lineup that Anthony Rendon created when he went to Anaheim. And I don't think that is there in Carter Kieboom at this point. I don't think it's getting there with him. I don't think they did enough. I don't think they improved behind the dish. There's not a whole lot there in terms of what they did to replace Adam Eaton, who went out the door. They're in trouble. They're in trouble. I don't think there's enough there to have them competing on a nightly basis. I think they're in a lot of trouble.
Joe, we talked about, and maybe that's one you're going to hit on, Victor Robles. Is he the answer in center field? I know you may touch on that, but go ahead.
Well, I said that to Derek earlier, Mike, actually, and to the listeners. We know how good Trey Turner and Juan Soto is. In my book, in my magazine, I keep referencing the Athlon Sports 2021 MLB Preview Edition. Yeah, Kyle Schwarber,
sponsor of the show.
Yeah, hitting second, playing left field. Kyle Schwarber is probably worse than Marcell Ozuna out there.
Oh,
so unless they just want his bat in there, I also said to Derek, could they be in the market for Jackie Bradley Jr. quietly? I don't think so. I'm just throwing it out there. Josh Bell's going to have to hit a ton of home runs, and we had a segment on a while ago. Yes. Derek, I remember this. This is how much I pay attention to our show, Derek. That we had a segment to see if Josh Bell would hit over 30, I think it was.
I think we said 35.
I said really under, high. But I said under by probably a lot. But no, I mean, like Derek said, you have Starlin Castro. This lineup is underwhelming. Victor Robles is not that good. He's decently equipped with speed. Carter Kieboom's okay, but we don't know who he is yet. It's going to be powered by Turner, Soto, Bell, and I didn't even mention Schwarber because Schwarber hit 188 last year. What is he going to be that good? I mean, and I will agree this time with the starters, they're not that good. And unless Strasburg and Corbin light the world on fire, I don't think, or DC Nationals Park and bring the attitude back as Michael loves it so much. I don't.
I want to just clarify Max Scherzer's a future Hall of Famer. John Lester is going to be borderline Hall of Famer. Steven Strasburg has all the talent in the world. The concern isn't whether or not they're a talented unit. The concern is, can that talent project over 162 at ages 36, 32, 37? You're banking on, you're really risking innings on guys who have a lot of mileage. And for me, it's not about their talent. And I'm sure that's what you meant, Joseph. I just need to clarify on my end. I don't question any of their talent. I question their ability to make the starts and do them effectively without injuries.
Well, Scherzer's back's always injured, right? And Strasburg, you're looking at him, had the payday after having a great World Series. But sometimes, like Michael also said, a great point by you in this aspect, you can't be okay with being okay. Soto's playing right field. You have a hole in left. You didn't even address the hole in left. You let the Marlins go get Duvall. Are you kidding me? You let the Marlins get Duvall. You could have had Duvall playing in the outfield. I'm not impressed by Washington. I might be interested myself where I have them, depending on the Marlins, those two teams. I'm talking to myself about the situation now. But I will say I made a huge mistake earlier, though, Derek. I thought we were going to the Phillies next, and I was excited for that, and we're saving them. All right.
So yeah, the Nationals are very interesting, I must say. I have their strengths and their weaknesses. I have that they are very strong in parts but very weak in other parts. Let me explain.
I like that.
Top of the lineup, maybe one of the best in the division. Turner, Soto,
Arguably.
Bell, Schwartz, depending on what you get out of Schwarber. But the bottom of the division, you have no idea what you're going to get. Jan Gomes is the starting catcher right now with Alex Avila, who, okay, if that was, 5 years ago, great.
Blake
Um,
Swarhart, the Prophet Ball.
Victor Robles, what are you getting out of him? As Joe mentioned, Carter Keyboom, what are you getting out of him? I think there's too many up in the air. Ryan Zimmerman off the bench, Josh Harrison off the bench. I mean, and then the rotation is, you're as you guys have said, you're putting a ton. I think we're going to see a pretty darn good year out of Scherzer, because I think he's going to want to try to carry this rotation, because guaranteed Strasburg or Corbin gets hurt. But those three, okay, amazing. But again, John Lester, Joe Ross. I mentioned to Joe, Eric Fetty. Is he going to get more innings again this year? I mean, those random guys, Voth, that are just no good, and they just keep throwing them out there. They just didn't get any depth. They have no depth in the in the minor leagues, as we mentioned. I will say the one name, Cade Cavalli, is there a top prospect. He's number 99, could potentially be up in the next few years. We didn't mention Brad Hand. They brought Brad Hand in to probably close, so we'll see where that goes. I don't know about the rest of the bullpen though, but
Gotta get to him.
Mike,
Gotta
we'll
get to
start
him.
with you just real quick so we have some time for our last team. Strengths and weaknesses for Washington.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned it. I think their back end of their bullpen is actually a strength for them. They have 4 top 100 relievers. Brad Hand, Tyler Rainey, Daniel Hudson's awesome, and Wander Suero is an absolute animal who only gets better every single year. And they have 2 of the best players in the division. Trey Turner is unbelievable to watch, and Juan Soto can carry you for weeks at a time. So whenever you have, and look, I get it. Kyle Schwarber, Josh Bell, their additions. I don't know how much better they make the Nationals. I don't think that replaces the guy who they truly miss the most, in Anthony Rendon. I don't think either one of them does that. They just haven't found that yet. And I think that's a weakness for them. Until they can find that replacement, it's just, I don't think that offense is going to go as far as they need it to go.
They're lacking. They're lacking at third base. It's totally very easy to see. Third base and catcher. Real Muto and Bryant would have made this team really interesting, real fast. And it would have made us cry ourselves to sleep at night during the summer. But thank God this didn't happen. Washington, we'll see you next year.
So that will bring us to where most of our listeners are waiting for here. The Philadelphia Phillies. Now, interesting, according to Fangraphs, they have the Phillies at 13.4% to make the playoffs. Last year they finished third at 28-32, and of course head coach Joe Girardi coming back for his second season, obviously 28-32 last year. Let me just throw out some of the additions and subtractions for the team, and then we'll let the guys dive into it, because I'll probably stay quiet for a little bit. Some additions they brought in: Jose Alvarado, good left-handed pitcher; Archie Bradley, a relief pitcher from Cincinnati; Matt Moore, lefty starting pitcher; Chase Anderson and CJ Chatham from Boston. Interesting minor league guys they brought in: Neftali Feliz, Ivan Nova, Brandon Kintzler, who I think may be a big part of the bullpen, and Matt Joyce. And then they lost Jake Arrieta, Brandon Workman, Tommy Hunter, Jay Bruce, David Phelps, and one David Robertson. Let's start. Was he even a Philly? We'll start with you, Joe. Give us some overall impressions on the Phillies going into 2021.
All right. Well, this is where I got to start. I got to start with a conversation that me and Michael had going back, I would say before Dave Dombrowski got hired. And the conversation went something like this. And I'm not quoting, this is just will make sense for everybody. This Phillies organization was going down a dark place, Derek. We were going to let JT Realmuto walk out the door. We were going to probably not sign Didi and maybe sign Freddie Galvis, who again, sorry, Dad, but there's just such a big difference there. Michael said to me, listen, I don't want you to get your hopes up. I'm trying not to get my hopes up. But if we don't do something in the front office, we're not going to do anything. Well, in comes Dombrowski, and we signed about 37 guys, and that's a little exaggeration. But
Close.
no, I mean, it's close. Right, it's close. We had flurries of signings. So, listen, I can't even temper my excitement. I'm really excited for the season. This is going to be a fun team to watch for the Phillies fans out there. For people that aren't Philly fans, well, the swagger's coming back because we got some guys that can play the game. There's no doubt about it. One of the most exciting players I'm really looking forward to is Mr. Alec Boehm. And that brings me to a question I have because I had to put this down. We think he could be an all-star, possible MVP. Do we see him being a 40 home run guy? Is he going to be that guy? Will he be a power guy? I know he's a very good hitter. There's no doubt about that. But I just want to know, is his ceiling that type of power?
I don't know if 40 is the right number for him. The frame isn't quite there. The swing isn't exactly what you look at for a 40 home run guy. I think 25 to 30 is very fair when he hits, his stride when he finds his power completely. But 40 is that's a tall ask. He hits the ball really well to all fields. I mean, his swing it's a beautiful thing. I mean, he just finds a way to put the bat on the ball. And when you look at him, you don't see that in him. He looks like he'd be a guy who swings out of his shoes, but that's not who he is. It's not who he was in college either. He's a tremendous player. We're going to continue to suffer watching him defensively until they figure out what to do with him. He is not a very sound defense. He looks like a baby giraffe trying to find his legs over there at third base, 90% of the time. But I'll deal with it if I get to watch somebody hit 300 with them as much ease and hit with runners in scoring position with as much confidence as this kid does at such an early stage in his career.
And I think, Derek, you know this too from watching as much baseball and being around the game. For a guy like this, I don't want to see him have too much pressure in the lineup as like a 4 or 5 guy. I know you have Harper hitting third, probably Hoskins and Realmuto, Didi. I want Alec Boehm hitting second. I think that'd be a great place for him in the lineup. I've had thrown out lineups to Mike that I love Didi second or even Segura. I think I get a little too enamored with the hitting behind runners and this and that. Alec Boehm proves like he can hit the ball everywhere. So I love him too. I just hope the Phillies love him too. The other thing I want to say too is, and I don't know how to put this other than hopefully somebody grabs center field, because if not, we're going to have this controversy all season. And center field is a great way to, I think, I'll kick it to one of you guys to talk about maybe center field because I don't know what to say anymore about it.
So I actually wrote down in the lineup hitting eighth someone because I don't know who's going to be starting in center field on April 1st. I don't know that Girardi knows yet either. Somebody's got to take it by the reins and win the job. Unfortunately, that person could be Odubel Herrera, and that's a whole nother show in and of itself. They're paying him the money. He's going to get a guy's invite today. So it very well could be him. If a guy like Adam Hazley doesn't take the reins, could be Scott Kingery on a day-to-day basis, could be Roman Quinn. I will say this though, and I've said this numerous times as I kind of circle up my whole review summary of this team. This is a top 10 offense. It was last year. They're running it back with the same offense. And that was despite not having an everyday center fielder. So if Adam Hazley can win that job, or Odubel Herrera, if it so be him, I have my own issues there, but if it is him and they're just, a little bit better, the offense is still a top 10 offense. Here's the part that I want to focus in on, because the reason that no one's picking them to do better than what Derek said at the beginning, that 13%, is because of the nightmare bullpen situation that they presented last year. It was historically bad. I mean, historically bad. The worst baseball's ever seen. They couldn't find a guy to get outs. It became this inevitable case of whoever comes in isn't going to get outs. Guys, fun fact for you. They held a lead in 49 of the 60 games last season. The only National League team to hold the lead in more games than the Phillies were the Dodgers. One team won the World Series. The other team didn't make the playoffs. The Phillies won 28 games. That means they held a lead in 21 losses. And I know some people are probably thinking, well, that was probably a first or second inning. No, from somebody who watched the games, they held late inning leads more than 10 times last year. If they even win 8 of those 21 games, guys, they win the division last year. If they win 8 of those games out of the 21 games they held a lead, they win the division. This bullpen is already better based on subtraction, based on the slight addition of an Archie Bradley, the Hector Rondon. You know, they're deep all over the place. Now, one guy, Derek, that you didn't get a chance to mention because he's not listed officially yet, that they added to the bench, Brad Miller. They didn't have that kind of a bat last year consistently because Jay Bruce was hurt all the time. They are the most improved team in the NL East. It's not close, and I'd argue anybody in terms of depth, top to bottom of this roster, they are the deepest team in terms of improvements all across the board. They're set up to compete this year, despite what everybody says. And they have the manager to do it. They have the manager to do it.
That's true.
They had the manager before. They have it now too.
I said to Joe, I think it can be said that in the NL East, the Phillies have the most experienced lineup. Guys that have been around for so long, McCutchen, even Bryce Harper, 8 years, Real Muto and Didi, Segura, guys who have been there. And I think that could end up making a difference if they come up against like a Washington or a Marlins team down the stretch that I think they have the experience over them. We talked about the bullpen, brought in a lot of new guys, so that's going to kind of be overhauled. I will mention still Sir Anthony Dominguez is still going to be out. He had Tommy John surgery last July, so he's going to be out for the entire year. I said strengths, bullpen additions, but I also said weaknesses, enough bullpen additions. Is it enough? I don't know. We'll have to see. I think it'll be someone like Hector Doris is going to be huge. And if he can truly lock down that closer role, whether it's Archie Bradley or Doris, I'm not sure. But I will ask you guys real quick before we get into strengths and weaknesses. What do we think about the back end of the rotation? Obviously, Nola Wheeler is strong. Can even make the Eflin as number 3. That's okay. But Velasquez, Matt Moore, and then you guys like Spencer Howard, who is a young starting pitcher coming up, could be very good. What do we think about the back end?
So the bar is Vinny Velasquez, right? Anybody else?
Right.
Listen, Vinny has all the potential in the world, but he can't get out of the 4th inning. All we need in that spot, if you're the Phillies, when you think about it, is a guy who can eclipse the 5th, 6th inning and hopefully get you to a much improved bullpen at that point. So, one thing that we know about Matt Moore coming over is a lot of teams are in. They gave him a $3 million deal. Hopefully he can up that bar. Another guy that Chase Anderson signing is a signing that I'm interested to see how it turns out. I know Joseph's interested in another guy. I'll turn it to him, but there's enough pieces to compete there that I think it could make that back end interesting. At the very worst, it's not going to be worse than Vince Velasquez.
Well, I thought of this for a long time now, and these signings have been really interesting. Like I said, the kind of like flurries in boxing. I look at Matt Moore in the role of the 4th starter. He gives you another look. He's a soft tosser. He doesn't throw incredibly hard. He did a good job in Japan. I listened to him on a podcast. He's very confident in his abilities. He also makes sense as a situational lefty out of the pen, but we have Andrew Suarez to help with that too. That's another lefty people don't know about. Damon Jones and Kyle Dowie are 2 names to keep an eye on as their young arms. But I'm going to tell you right now, if Chase Anderson either is better fit for the bullpen or just better fit for a trade option, maybe. I keep my eye on Ivan Nova. I keep saying Ivan Nova will be comfortable this year in a fifth role if Girardi wants him to be there. It's going to be Anderson, Moore, Nova. Vinny's either the pen or a trade. And I just think that's the way they're going to go. In my hopes, I've been telling Mike this for a while. I want Moore and Anderson, but if Moore can help us more in the bullpen, I'm okay with that. But it's going to be worked out in the spring, and that's a very interesting competition as NBC Sports Philadelphia and Jim Salisbury will definitely be writing a lot about.
Joe, 30 seconds of strength. We may have hit on a lot of the points already, so you can probably be pretty quick. 30 seconds, strengths, weaknesses for the Phillies.
Man, it's tough when you watch them every day. And Mike says it all the time. We're so hard on our team, but I think the strength has got to be the guys in the lineup, the way they're going to be able to, and that's part A, the way they're going to be able to score runs, hopefully for Phillies fans and knock in runs. I think the other part of that is Aaron Nola. Aaron Nola is a huge part of this team. Him and Zach Wheeler are huge in the top of that rotation. And I think they're an absolute strength. As far as the weakness, I'm going to go with a little bit of the bench just because I don't love the bench, but I also don't hate the bench. So I'm going to give the bench like a half. And then I'm really worried about the compliments of McCutchen in left field. Is it Matt Joyce? Is it Adam Hazley? He's a corner outfielder. Nobody's talking about it. And then Herrera could take the center field job by himself, throw in their Kingery. And there's all encompassing the bench again. So the bench and the outfield scare me a little bit. But Michael said it, we improved immensely, and I was talked into where I didn't think I'd be talked into tonight.
Mike?
Yeah, I'll echo that. Offense is a major strength. Whenever Gene Segura is going to hit 7th for your lineup, you're in a good place. They're really strong all the way across, and Rhys Hoskins was only getting better before he got hurt last year. The top 3 in the rotation, I'm a big Zach Eflin guy. I think he hasn't even reached his potential. He's only 26 years old. Most people think he's older than that, but he's only 26. The depth, this is the deepest Phillies team we've had maybe since that run back from 7 to 11. I think this might be deeper in terms of guys they can pluck from, retreads in a sense, but guys that are talented and can get the job done for the most part. The weakness, look, this defense is no better than it was last year and is the 24th ranked defense in the league. So that's a problem. Baum's a problem. Kutch is not the same player he was. We don't have a center fielder, so it's basically a blank space out there. Didi regressed defensively. We'll see. The defense is a problem, and I think it'll cause them issues.
So that'll do it for the Philadelphia Phillies. So that will do it for our preview of the NL East. Before we go, though, as promised, we will get Mike's just 1 through 5. Now, again, everyone, let's not forget that this is February 16th. So a lot could happen between even now and opening day. So, but based on now, Mike, give us a let's get a little suspense here. 5 through 1. For what you think that they're going to finish in the NL East.
So I'm a little chalky in some senses, but we talked about it before. I don't think the Marlins did anything, and I think they'll have the biggest fall from grace this year. They'll land at number 5. I think they're going to struggle a little bit, keeping dudes successful, healthy, in the rotation. So I think the Marlins will fall at 5. I got the Nationals finishing 4th. I don't see that rotation making it through the year. And I just don't see that offense being able to carry the load, especially in the firepower offense that the NL East holds. They just haven't done enough. And I feel like they're gonna lose innings from really important starters throughout this season. So that'll cost them in the long run. Here's where it gets a little interesting for me. I think the top 3 could, be mixed and matched a multitude of ways. I went with the Mets at 3rd. They're the Mets until they prove to me that they're not the Mets. Francisco Lindor is a tremendous player. Does he move the needle enough to make them that much better? I don't know. I don't think that they did as much as everybody thought they were going to do this offseason. And they were a 4th place team last year. So does Frankie Lindor make all the difference for them? We'll see. Maybe he brings a different energy and I'm totally off, but I just don't get that feel that they're that much better than they were. And look, guys, I'm not going to make it super suspenseful here for you. I've said it at the beginning of the show. Until you unthrone them, they're the best team in the division. I got the Braves 1 and the Phillies 2. A lot of things have to fall right for the Phillies this year. They're going to have to stay healthy. Kutcher's going to have to be a lot better. You mentioned it, Derek. The back end is going to have to hold up. And is the bullpen addition going to be enough? Like I said, they only needed the 28th best bullpen in baseball to win the division last year. End of the day, I think we might actually find a wild card team from this division. I don't think we'll get two because I think one's coming out of the West. But I think the Braves win it. I don't think there's much of an argument there, unless some crazy stuff happens that they miss some players or they're so good top to bottom, in and out, that I just don't see them giving up the division title yet. But I do think the Phillies finish ahead of the Mets, and I think they made enough additions. I think Dombrowski made a huge impact on this roster, and I forecast it to fall that way. You'll check back in on me next September, and you'll laugh at the way I predicted. That's just the way it goes. That's why baseball is great. So much happens in that marathon of a season, and so much changes. So I'm excited to go through it. It'll be a blast, like it always is. Just happy that we're going to get a lengthy season this year.
And that will do it. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you coming on as our first guest. For those that don't know, we're going to be doing all 6 of the divisions. We're going to be doing, I don't have them off the top of my head, but we're going to be going all 6 divisions, 3 of which are going to be with guests, and 3 are going to be just me and Joe. So, but when the guests come on, we are going to get their opinions on where teams will finish. So you will see Joe and my division picks at the very end is probably when we'll do that. But Mike, thank you very much for coming on. It's always a pleasure. And the first time I think we're actually talk baseball with you. So we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. A lot of fun, and be interested to see what you guys come up with for your picks. And anybody listening for the first time, keep listening to these guys. They keep me entertained on my way to work a couple times a week. So keep giving them a listen and share it out because they're doing a great job.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for that. Thank you.
And Joe, last thoughts from you?
No, just a fun show again. It was a little nerve-wracking to have the Phillies last, but I asked for that. Trying to see if my patience can take it. It'll be good to get together again on Friday. If the snow's coming again, it'll give me something to look forward to. Just to talk some more about catchers, as we're going to talk about, I think, in our list. And just so Mike remembers, we're going to probably have more for the draft show in April, which is a little further away, but we'll be here before we know it.
We'll have a lot to talk about at that point. I can't.
Will Carson be an Eagle? Yes or no?
Baseball. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
See you, Mike. Thanks again, bud.
See you guys.
Well, that'll do it, everyone. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, all podcast platforms, Twitter, and our Facebook page on Time Out with Derek and Joe everywhere. As always, thank you for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Stay safe, everyone. Take care.